Hello, my name is Mark DiCarlo. Today my guest is Mr. John Kelly, always a perennial guest because I told you earlier I get sick of begging politicians to come on. Maybe that's my own pride and I should try a little bit harder. But thanks for coming on, John.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
I wanted to get some shows in the can. The big talk online, etc., and in the Corpus Christi Caller-Times, our newspaper, is about Uber, which is a ride-share plan wherein somebody has an application on their phone. They press the application and an independent driver comes and picks them up. Right. It's paid for on the phone, and allegedly you get a picture of the driver. There was some debate in the city council. They basically banned Uber because they required fingerprints, and for whatever reason, the corporation, which I believe started in one of the Scandinavian countries or something.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I think so.
At any rate, did not want their drivers to be fingerprinted, so Uber said we're pulling out of town. And of course, in particular, many young people who go to bars, and many, I think, poor people too, that needed the service because they can't afford.
Well, the rate's
cars
about half of what a taxi
and
is.
Insurance, etc. They were up in arms, and I think they still are up in arms regarding the banishment of Uber. And I believe the only city councilman who, in fact, voted against the requirement of fingerprints for Uber was Mark Scott.
Exactly.
I actually saw Mark Scott in a club one night, and I thanked him for voting that way. And because I'm not always politically aligned with Mr. Scott, but on that particular issue, I thought he was right in pocket. Why do you think was there? I always think, unfortunately, I'm kind of a conspiratorialist. So when the city council wanted basically banned Uber, I thought it wasn't for good reason, and I felt it probably had to do with something regarding money and there were lobbying efforts on the part of the city, on the part of the cab companies in the city of Corpus Christi. Do you have any knowledge regarding whether or not there was actually influence from the cab companies regarding that issue?
I don't know about that. I know they certainly showed up in force to public testimony. I think the other problem is, and we've seen this on a couple of different issues, Mark, is that we have a mayor that is very attuned to what she thinks the public wants, as opposed to necessarily what's good for the city, or what she thinks they want is not always what they want, and she will take the least political risk possible. We saw this also with the marijuana, the recent attempt to change the marijuana citation from a pick up and take you to jail to issue a citation and show up in court. And the city council voted against that as well. In both times, she took the position of what I think was she viewed as a politically safe position. Let's be as absolutely careful that nothing's going to happen as possible. We're not going to take any risk. She was against removing discussing the idea that we should just issue a citation for simple possession of small amounts of marijuana. And again, when it came to Uber, she insisted on fingerprinting at the highest level possible of security, and then basing both of those arguments on public safety. And I really think it's pretty nebulous. And then to compound that, I think she did the real disservice to the chief of police. And we have a new chief of police, Mike Markle, a very competent person. In both cases, she drags the chief of police up there and says, well, what's the most safest thing we can do to make sure that nothing happens to anybody? And of course, he's forced at that point to say, the strictest thing possible, which is fingerprinting. No, we ought to take those people to jail. Well, there was actually two situations there. The one with the marijuana really wasn't a city issue, and I think that people from Normal kind of got screwed up getting it on the agenda because the problem, I don't think, was there. The problem was over at the prosecutor's office. It wasn't with the city. And Mike Markle took the hit for the city council, the chief of police, saying, well, yes, we need to do that. That gets them off the hook, which was what Nelda was looking for. And she did the same thing with the Uber thing, which was, well, what do you think, Chief? What's the safest possible thing? Well, fingerprinting, biometric, that's the safest thing. See, the chief says so. Therefore, we have to. That's kind
Are
of
cab drivers fingerprinted?
yes. Cab drivers are fingerprinted. They also are highly regulated and pay a number of other fees, including 2% of their
Well,
gross or their profit.
one of the
city.
things I'd like to talk about Facebook in a second too, and its influence maybe on the media, etc. But one of the things that I said is, it's not like we're protecting good jobs. In other words, these
No.
cab drivers are exploited,
Right.
poorly paid,
Right.
and if we wanted a protective environment, like up north, you have
Right.
union jobs, you say, well, look, put tariffs, these people have good jobs.
Right.
I mean, to me, these cab drivers would probably be better off being Uber drivers.
I have that question as well. I think so too.
I mean, it's good for it may be good for the cab companies.
Right.
They're making some money, but in terms of the
Right.
drivers, it's just
Well,
awful.
you have to ask yourself the question. And this is interesting, and I think this is really interesting and tells a lot. Why do we regulate cab companies in the city? Well, we regulate them because they have a monopoly.
Right.
And if you call a cab, they may show up in an hour, they may not. They won't go to some parts of town like the island.
Let me say something.
And they charge outrageous. It costs $40 for me to go to the airport.
Well, and
And I could get Uber for half that.
well, and another thing is, I've never been to a city, usually a big city,
Right.
that I've ever used a cab. 1 out of 3 times I'm cheated.
Right.
How am I cheated? They drive around in circles, or they
Right,
go
right.
slow, or they
Right.
manipulate that flag somehow.
Right.
So it's not like they're the greatest service in the world either.
Right.
Plus, you go in the big cities, New York or whatever. If you are, and I'm not necessarily, but if you're one of these persons who's very suspicious of people from foreign countries, they're always from some third world country, right?
Right.
I mean, now I don't know about in the city of Corpus Christi, but in the larger cities, they're always from like a third world country. You could hardly, it's very difficult to understand. So, I don't know. I don't think any of these issues were discussed, including the need for this service by relatively poor people.
Well, my public testimony was this. I'm 66 years old. I have a master's degree in human behavior. I've run, built and run a multi-million-dollar a year company. I don't think there's anybody up there I need to ask who I should get in a car with. I think I can make that decision for myself. But I want to back this regulation thing because that's an important issue. So the issue becomes really not which is safer. The issue is if we're regulating taxi cabs so they won't have a monopoly, well, if we now have competition from Uber, then shouldn't we deregulate taxi cabs?
Well, then that's an issue too. That's an issue too. One thing that I wanted to mention on air that wasn't, I don't think, intelligently discussed is the Caller Times editorials dug in, and one of them said, well, it's safer to walk 4 miles. Well, let me tell you something. The city of Corpus Christi,
we didn't have sidewalks.
well, they love to arrest you for public intoxication in this town.
Absolutely.
They love that.
Oh, yeah.
And then try dealing with the municipal court.
Exactly.
And try getting a case, dismissed or getting a fair trial.
Right.
Well, you may be entitled to a fair trial if you get there, but by the time you go to court so many times, et cetera, on these many, I believe, frivolous public intoxication cases. So the stand basically against Uber was very, I think, unfair. I don't think it was intelligently discussed. And I think it was keeping Corpus Christi in the dark ages.
It is, absolutely. And what happened is that the way Nelda presented it the first time, the mayor presented it the first time, kind of put the council, they didn't really give them a lot of information. There was nobody there from Uber to explain their system. So they were kind of bent over, It's like, okay, the mayor was going to shove this through, and she did. Well, then, when the response came out, more information came out, Chad McGill said, we need to bring this up for reconsideration.
Well, that was after the people are in an uproar.
Well, and it was after they got more. There was a lack of information the first time.
Well, that's the thing about the city council. We had a brief discussion before the show. Is one of the reasons that I think in many respects attorneys are preferable on the city council is because they seem to basically just follow the information they're given by what is referred to as a city staff. And I don't know that they have the powers really of discernment or whatever. And I don't know that they have the time to go back behind these scenes. Because I think that anybody that had talked to a young person about the use of Uber would
Right.
have said, well, look, these kids are using it. They get a picture of the taxi cab
Right,
driver.
right.
There's no way that you could be cheated because of the
Right.
way it's paid online. I think almost anybody would have voted in favor of against the resolution regarding
I'm
fingerprinting.
going to take a rough guess. I'm going to take a rough guess about how this whole thing came about. And my rough guess would be is that the taxi cab companies feeling the pinch, one complained to the mayor. The mayor says, well, they're operating captive, and her position is they're operating a cab company illegally. Well, ride sharing is not a taxi cab company. Totally different animal, right? And so her mind, they were operating illegally in the city of Corpus Christi. And so that was the two things that she pushed. One was the safety issue that, Uber's, not going to fingerprint. And the second, and we're not going to be bullied. Yeah. That was her thing. And then, the other one was they're operating illegally, and by passing this, we'll allow them to operate illegally if they comply with our thing. That's what she tried to sell, and it was totally a way to shut Uber down. And she knew it and tried to cover it up with this other stuff.
Well, what's interesting too. It's so integrated with the whole internet movement.
Yes,
and it's so integrated. It would almost be similar to saying, well, Amazon can't sell because they're competing with Walmart, and they're delivering packages here through UPS, and they're going to have additional, regulation, etc. Well,
I think I was correct the first time when this issue was voted on. When I testified, I said, the problem here we have here is the law has not caught up with the technology. And that's really simply what's going on here.
So, and then the marijuana law, which I was kind of disappointed. I'm not saying whether or not I was for or against this, because I'm not that familiar with the ordinance they were trying to pass to give people a ticket for a certain amount of marijuana.
Yeah.
Kyle Holscher, who is the president of the Normal Chapter, National Organization to Reform Marijuana Laws, has been on the show. I don't believe he discussed that attempt to change the ordinance in the city.
Yeah, they were there and supported it heavily.
And the only thing that I thought I had heard that it was maybe they went about it the wrong way because it was actually a little bit much. It was a lot of marijuana. What was the number? What was the number of ounces? It was 5 ounces or something.
4. It might have been 4, which is at the state. I think it's the same as whatever the state statute is. The state statute that allowed this was passed a couple of years ago.
But back in the old days, what was a nickel
2
bag?
ounces.
A nickel bag was 2 ounces?
No, I think 2 ounces was what the... I don't remember if it's 2 ounces or 4 ounces, but
in college, the kids used to talk about nickel bags and stuff. I don't remember if that was an ounce or 2. Well, but it wasn't. I don't think it was 4.
No, I don't think so either. 4.
Yeah, 4
I think it was 2 ounces, Mark.
Yeah.
I think it's 2
ounces.
Okay,
so...
And that's what the state law is. It was
so
whatever
that
it was
based on
consistent with the state law.
I see.
And so, I think that... I don't believe the sheriff wants him clogging up his jail. He doesn't, want to need to process those people through there. They don't need to be pumping through the detention center.
Well,
they don't. It's just ridiculous.
Well, the only thing that, I'm not. I don't know whether to agree or not to agree. I think that's a point well taken.
Well, we have now 5 states that recreational use is legal.
Well,
and 35 that some form of medical is allowed.
Well, what really amazed me, it didn't seem like there was any dissenting view. They just slammed it down.
I know, that's what bothered me.
That's what bothered me.
And again,
it's worthy of discussion.
Okay, again, remember that everybody up there is going to be reelected next, or have to go up for reelection in November. Mm-hmm. Now, Nelda knows that. Okay, Nelda's been on the wrong side of a bunch of upside-down votes. She's been on the losing side of a bunch of 5-4 votes. She's not looking good politically. How does she boost her image? Well, I got to get some 9-0 votes on some issues that are going to get some headlines. So I'm going to get this. I'm going to put the council in a position where, boy, you better support me or you're going to be looking like, you're for marijuana? You want to run on that in the fall? Okay, you want to run on that in the fall? I mean, that's the position she puts him in. You're going to go against the chief of police? You're going to go against the chief of police on Uber? You're going to go against the chief of police? No, you're going to agree with me, else you're going to pay a political price. And she proved it, Mark, this last week. Chad McGill had put it up for reconsideration, okay, which would have given them the opportunity to come back and say, look, we got more information. We need more information. This decision was made too hastily. Let's would pull the idea, which they ended up doing, saying that, look, we want to go back and negotiate some form of auditing of their background check system so that we know it's working and it's fair, and we'll go do away with the fingerprint if we can come to an agreement on that with Uber. And the Uber guy was there and said, yeah, we'll sit down with you, take 30 to 60 days, get this worked through. Okay. Nelda put the reconsideration item down the agenda and instead stuck her own item in there regarding Uber to vote it up or down. She wanted to put every council member in a place where they'd have to say, we screwed up last week and we're all wrong and let's put it down, or we weren't wrong and you're going to support me. And of course then she argued again that it was a safety issue, and she brought two people in from Houston, which is still in negotiations with Uber, who Uber pulled because they wouldn't agree to not do it with a fingerprint. That's not resolved yet. She brought them in, and that's what Mark Scott objected to. He said, I'm offended. He says, I could have brought people in from other cities who have negotiated other agreements, and we could have talked about those too. But you're bringing somebody in, and she denied bringing them in. How'd they get here? Oh, they just came on their own. And then he asked them, and he said, how'd you get here? He said, we were invited.
Well,
those kind of political manipulations prolonged that meeting by 3 hours.
Well, in defense of the mayor, it could be that she actually does believe that the fingerprinting is necessary for the safety of the public. It might very well be.
I agree. But there was a motion to reconsider, and it could have been dealt with under there. As it was, they had to deal with a up or down on a repeal that she stuck in there, and that wasted 3 hours. Then, when they got all done with that, then they ended up still having to go back to the measure to reconsider.
I will say that is within my knowledge.
And she voted against the measure to reconsider.
Fingerprinting is very rarely used.
Right.
When I got licensed between the United States Supreme Court years ago, nobody asked me for my fingerprint.
Right.
Nobody asked you for your fingerprint. When you're booked in jail, they ask for your fingerprint. But other than that, I can't really think of any professions or whatever that really require fingerprinting.
Well, and what's the relative risk? How many people, you let your furnace guy in your house? Do you ask for fingerprints? You have to ask for...
Well, Uber, through independent contractors or whatever, has a vested interest in making certain those drivers are safe.
Do you think, Mark, they would be in 200 cities and operating in 200 cities in Texas?
They have that vested interest to keep them safe, whether to keep their insurance premiums down, I assume, or whatever.
Think about the liability.
No, it's tremendous liability.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was an interesting issue recently. The marijuana issue was an interesting issue.
So what I see the mayor doing is using these issues to try to build some support for her to gain back some political capital. And
she's
using
what?
The
for
public,
what does she want political capital? Why does she want to be mayor again? To earn $6,000 to $10,000 a year? Something.
Well, the current rumor is that she's hoping that Hillary Clinton is going to be elected. And through her relationship with the Texas Municipal League, which she was president of last year, with the Castro brothers in San Antonio, which are very close to Clinton's, that she's hoping for a federal appointment to HUD.
John's got all the insider news. That's what you believe to be true.
That's what's been told to me by several different sources that I think are pretty respectable.
Is Hillary Clinton going to win the Democratic primary?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. It's much closer than people realize. A win in Wisconsin by Bernie would mean that he's won 11 of the last 12 times out.
Bernie Sanders
and people are going to start asking the question, who's going to win in the fall? Because he's been winning in states that are either could go either way or are blue states. She's been winning mostly red states that nobody cares about. They're not going to be voting Democrat in the fall.
Is Hillary Clinton a good Democratic candidate?
If you're a DNC believer, yeah. I think
what's DNC?
The Democratic National Committee basically wants to make sure that people like Bernie Sanders never ever get the nomination. They represent the free trade, neocon, let's go to war wing of the Democratic Party. The pretty much the Bill Clinton Republican light wing of the party.
They did the same thing to McGovern in '72.
Absolutely, and
then they destroyed his candidacy by their actions.
Yes, undermined him, and then when he failed, then they used that to come up with the superdelegate system, which we have now. That's when superdelegates came about after the McGovern.
And then that's
election.
favoring Hillary Clinton.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Well,
non-populist candidate.
I gotta say, in my opinion, she's the worst Democratic candidate we've had since Johnson, and I'm only saying that about Johnson when he took over when Kennedy. I'm only saying that because he was pretty much in many respects like a political thug, and of course his stand on the Vietnam War. But he did have some very progressive ideas on social change, some of which worked, some of which didn't. But he did have some very progressive ideas. But I gotta say that I think in Hillary Clinton, other than some of the female Democrats that think that it's time for a woman to be the Democratic candidate, I just can't see. I can't see how really the platform wherein she makes these paid speeches to large corporations that have the appearance of payola, wherein she's getting the large corporate donations.
Yes.
Her stand on that war in Libya and that
that was a disaster.
That awful statement that she made. We came, we saw he died.
Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself, who would make a joke about killing someone?
Well, not only that. I mean, Benghazi is not the shame in Libya. Libya is what she did to the in the country.
Right. No, I'm not talking about Benghazi.
No, I know, but I want to make sure that
you're right.
I want to make sure the audience understands that.
I think
that's
the
political.
Benghazi, and I think even the email, that's ridiculous. But on Libya and on her vote for Iraq,
the email's the issue.
Why is that an issue? I don't get the email.
I'll tell you why the email's the issue. First of all, Hillary Clinton, when first discovered, Hillary Clinton gave the explanation. I didn't know anybody who could figure out how to put 2 email accounts on a BlackBerry. Or my other option, I couldn't figure out how anybody, myself or anybody else in my entourage, could carry another phone. That was, the person
that was kind of fallacious. That was fallacious. That was
elected to be United States. That was her excuse. Now, if you read the Washington Post series about the emails, because she went to great lengths. This was not something that just happened accidentally. She went to great lengths to avoid detection that she was doing this. She went contrary to advice from the intelligence community again and again and again on these issues. The real story there, Mark, I don't think is the 30,000 that we've recovered or that she's turned over. It's the 30,000 or whatever it was that she destroyed and said were private, that we will never know what they are. And nobody trusts Hillary Clinton enough to believe that everything that was should have been given over was given over.
Number one, is my understanding, it was not illegal, which she did.
It was very questionable, and part of the part that can be illegal was the sending of highly classified material through an unsecured transmission.
There's no evidence that anybody received such evidence.
There's 22 documents.
You believe?
The Washington Post has documented. Right. There's 22 emails that have not been released because they're so highly sensitive.
All right, but I don't believe there's any evidence that it fell into any kind of foreign enemy's hands.
I don't believe it fell into any foreign enemy's hands.
So what's the damage?
It's a violation of the Espionage Act.
Plus, she did not ordinarily what these politicians do. They love to do the illegal thing, wherein they use like the government's cell phone for private use, or the government's free postage rights for their private use. She did the opposite. She didn't ask the government for any money. She paid for it herself.
Well, yeah, she set up a server in her basement. How secure is that?
Well, maybe. You know what? You know one of the things I thought why she did it? Now, this may be fallacious.
She did it because
I thought it was convenient.
She is
one cell phone instead of
it's very inconvenient, extremely inconvenient to create your own system. what she did it because she's paranoid about people knowing what she's doing. She has a long history of that. She is very extremely protective of her image. And maybe she's gun shy, and some of it has certainly been undeserved. But she is extremely paranoid about controlling her image. I mean, any press that's been around her at all will tell you that she's a long history of it.
Well, I don't know. I always read about how mean she is to the FBI and foul mouth. I always read that. Right. So I mean, I guess if you're that paranoid, I don't know that you'd be cussing at these people, would you? Right. I don't know.
It depends on your view of yourself and your own policy.
But I mean, really, that her issues on the foreign policy are just atrocious.
Yeah, they're terrible.
And then she's a corporatist.
Yes.
And then she's flip-flopped on so many of the issues.
Keystone,
and I'm conservative myself on the social issues, but she was against the homosexual marriage. Now she's for it. Right. And then you know what she reminds me a little bit of, and I probably shouldn't say this, but she reminds me a lot of Richard Nixon.
Yes.
I'm 100%.
When you said Richard Nixon earlier, that was my thinking.
Yeah. She's 100% politician.
Yeah.
100%.
Right.
She really doesn't care about much except for being president or economic and political power.
She actually exhibits certain characteristics of pathology. I'm trying to remember when there was a lie. Remember the lie when she said they were using Donald Trump's videos as ISIS training tools?
I don't remember.
That was easily confirmed. It was well known not to be true. She was ahead in the polls at the time. She had no reason to make that kind of statement, yet she pathologically makes up a lie and tells it to millions of people. That's pathological. You don't. If you're a good liar, a calculated liar, you don't say stuff that can be proven in 5 minutes to be wrong on the national news. You don't do that.
Well, the other lie that got a high degree of publicity that I just found kind of odd, wherein she said she was under fire when she went into some place in the Middle East.
And that's pathological. To make something up like that is pathological.
I thought maybe she was just trying, like a little kid makes up an exciting story or something. I don't know.
I don't like the Secretary of State or future president making up little stories that, make them bigger than life. That bothers me.
Well, here's another thing that bothers me regarding. Here's why I like, Bernie Sanders. One of the issues you wanted to talk about the homeless issue.
Right.
Nobody now maybe Mr. Sanders does have a social conscience for social problems. In other words, I think that he would agree that the homeless issue is a problem.
Right.
Urban ghettos are a problem.
Right.
These problems have to be, our militarism is a problem. Our involvement he would say these are problems and we need to fix the problems.
Right.
Hillary Clinton, I don't know.
Oh, she wants to use more force overseas.
Well, she's a great militarist. It's just all. I mean, after we lost we've been involved in these wars for how many years? We lost them,
and we started them.
We lost them, and now we're supposed to
creating more wars.
Now we're supposed to take in refugees, and we've created more terrorism.
Right.
So her stand there is ridiculous.
It's more of the same.
But where is her stand? How many homeless are we going to have on the street? When is this problem going to be addressed?
Well, so far her reaction to those kind of problems seems to be, don't expect too much.
We're
going to just kind of do the best we can.
Right. I mean, what are we going to do? I mean, somebody's got to come up with a plan sooner or later, exactly. Unless we have half of the people living on the street.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. Have there been any studies regarding the percentage of increases in homelessness the last 20 or 30 years?
I just did a review of that information for an article I did for the Flower Bluff newspaper that's going to come out in April on homelessness here in Corpus. And the 2016 point in time survey is not out, and hopefully that's going to be very comprehensive because they put more money and effort into it than ever before. But yes, we show a steady increase in the number of homeless in the community here. But let me say this, when you look at that, first of all, I think part of the problem we have is calling all these people without a home homeless. Like having a home is their major problem. And if we just stick them in a home, they'll be okay. Well, 70% have mental illness or substance abuse issues that are untreated or repeatedly treated without success because they don't have a stable environment. 70% of them are out of town. So if the people from the Salvation Army are correct, we have about 4,000 homeless in this community. Of only 5 to 10% are individuals and families who are actually have a problem financially getting into a home, or because of circumstances have lost their home. The rest are primarily a mental illness and substance abuse problem. And they have migrated here from other areas because we are a destination, and if you ask the police, they'll tell you we're a national destination for homeless people. Why? Well, cities like us, Tampa, Anaheim, California, have a combination of a couple things. One, warm weather year-round. That's the biggie. The second is a tolerant attitude towards homeless people. We put up with them. Other towns, they take very severe action towards homeless people, which isn't necessarily, certainly isn't a long-term answer. And third, here we have a unique situation where we have most of the homeless agencies are within a few blocks of City Hall. So unlike in San Antonio, if you get kicked out of a shelter, you have to go across town. You walk 2 blocks and there's another one. And our largest quote-unquote shelter really is nothing but a flop house because it doesn't really have any services. That doesn't work to help people really get off of.
Are you talking about Good Samaritan?
I'm talking about, the Good Samaritan is the largest one in town.
I gave him a donation.
You know?
And I don't often give donations
Right.
out, by the way.
Right.
Because I gave them a donation. I mean, and we might have a disagreement about that because I thought they were actually trying to get people on their feet and to give them some degree.
They do get people work, but they contract those people out.
They do. Well, we've talked about that before on the show, but I wanted to speak to, I did notice that we have a new police chief, and regarding the homeless issue, they are advertising, do not give the homeless
Instead,
any
give
money.
to the shelters.
And you said give to the shelters.
But the problem with that is,
I kind of thought that was agreed, and the bishop,
it looks good.
former
It
Bishop
sounds
Carmody
good.
was on the show, and
And
he agreed
everybody's
with
like,
that.
oh, it's wonderful. We're going to give to the shelters instead.
Right.
The problem is the shelters grow, and the more they grow, the more people come to the area to get services.
Well, but
And no, I don't believe that we are responsible for
well,
all
let me
the
say this.
people
Here's
in the north who want to
here,
come south
here's where I disagree.
spend the winter.
Here's where I did. Hey, by the way, when I drove to Houston, Texas in my 1973 Nova
Right.
in 1980 and lived at the YMCA, I had money.
Right.
So I brought money with me. So
Right.
I, went, I don't know how many
Right.
Northerners.
Right.
Just joking, but
No. Me too. I came from.
I can't. It was kind of a dramatic time. But here's where I do disagree with you. It's not like it's a national problem.
Right.
It's not like it's a local problem.
Right. But we can't fix the national problem here.
Well, I know. So, but I'm just saying, I know we can't, but it needs to be addressed nationally. That's why they're coming here.
Right, but we can't fix the national problem, Mark. We can fix the local problem.
What are you going to do, John? You're going to hit these people on top of the head with a club?
No.
What are we going to do, man? Hit them on top of the club and drag them out of town?
I think there's a number of measures that we can take. Number one, we need to radically improve mental health and substance abuse services, the availability and the quality here. Okay, well, that's a big issue.
Well,
The hospital district has some responsibility. The county has some responsibility.
They're going to do away with it.
And
They're going to do
exactly.
They're going to do away with Memorial.
And they're avoiding that responsibility. They're totally avoiding that responsibility. They need to get involved. And we need a public opinion to say, county, we're paying these taxes for you to run this hospital district. And, that means that you have a role here to take care of the mentally ill and addicted in our community. That is part of healthcare. In fact, the ACA makes that very clear. Every insurance policy now has to include mental health and substance abuse treatment. So it's a national perspective that this is part of healthcare, and we need to recognize that. The hospital district does have access to funds. The second part of that is you don't get mentally ill and addicted people into treatment by allowing them to continue and supporting them in their addiction. We have a number of churches and social agencies here in town that run soup kitchens. They hand out free clothing, and they come over to the city hall or wherever, and they allow these things. Now, what does that do? That allows those people to continue to live on the street, not get sober, not go to their mental health appointments, because they're getting supported in their illness. And we know from, I was in the addiction and mental health field for 30 years. If you allow people, if you continue to enable people to live in sickness, they will do that because they're not thinking right. The reason addiction and mental illness are illnesses is because that person is not making rational decisions for themselves. Their brain is not functioning appropriately. And yes, it needs to be volunteer. I'm not for picking up people off the street and throwing them in institutions and force. Never works. But I've seen it work in other places, Mark, where you have, number one, social workers out on the street that are working with homeless people to get them into services. We need a place where when people who are mentally ill or drunk on the street are picked up by the police, instead of going to the jail, they go to a facility where they get some treatment, sobered up a little bit, get some options. And one of those options should be, do you want to go back home? Do you want to go back home? Is there a place that is going to work for you?
Well, it's almost like the refugee issue. It's almost like the refugee issue.
Right. These are mental health and substance abuse refugees.
Well, right.
Think of them that way.
Or like these refugees. Of course, we have some social and moral obligation, I would argue, towards some of the refugees because we are the ones that actually invaded their countries, bombed them, et cetera, for dubious purpose, very dubious. No weapons of mass destruction. Obviously, no weapons of mass destruction, as Mr. Trump said, and obviously Bin Laden was not in Afghanistan. So that very, very questionable. So maybe we have some degree, but it's not like the American people necessarily. Many of them have it that good that they can be that benevolent towards these refugees.
Well, the refugees coming in the United States, first of all, it takes over 2 years to legally get in the United States if you're from the Middle East. It only 10,000 a year are allowed in from that area. We are not taking tons of refugees.
No,
is there any plan to take?
We're taking very few. But let me say something.
And the ones that are here, that come here, are heavily connected usually with people that they're placed with a lot of times extended family that are already in the United States.
The ones here,
people are.
But again, I'm a conspiratorialist. Do I think it's an accident that Muslim people are going into Germany, that they're going into Europe, that they're trying to get in Australia? It's almost like, and there's so many different things that are occurring all over the world, sometimes just the Western world, all over the world, you say, is this an accident? Is this an accident? And they don't report it that way.
Right.
It's never reported that way, that maybe they did bailouts in Canada, maybe they did bailouts here, maybe they did. This is not reported that way. It's always anecdotally in the United States, but they're doing the same things with these they do the same things almost all over the world now.
In terms of, I don't know.
Well, whatever it is, whether it's the involvement in some of the Middle Eastern wars, whether or not it's the bailouts, whether or not it's the refugees crises, it's all over the world. Am I to believe that this is an accident? And that's a conspiracy.
Well, I don't think the refugees thing is an accident. It's because we went in there and made a mess out of all Middle East. I mean, it's pretty clear how we got there.
Was that an accident?
Thank you, George W.
Is the continual destruction of the Middle East and then an attempt to incorporate them into American culture?
No.
Is that an accident?
No, I don't think. I think it's all unseen consequences of bad decisions.
And
you
don't think that much of the I would say propaganda.
Incompetence is much more likely than
much of the propaganda that is saying that if you're against illegal immigration or you're against Muslims coming into the United States who we're at war with, probably our fault, we're at war with them,
We're not at war with.
But that makes you a
we're not at
racist.
war
Is Mr.
with-
Trump a
we're-
racist
we're
because
not-
he's against illegal refugees
We're not at war.
coming in?
Well, wait a minute. First of all, nobody's talking about illegal refugees.
Well,
We're talking about
well-
legal refugees. And second,
well, I
second
don't
of all-
know. No.
and second of all-
Some of the
and
Muslims,
sec-
some of the
and
Muslims
second-
are coming in illegally, right? They're
Well,
coming.
yeah, but
you know.
those aren't the ones he's saying don't let in. He's saying don't let the people in at all, legally or otherwise.
Well,
now second,
no,
and
no.
second, yes, that's what he's saying. And second, yes, no Muslims. Period. That's what he's saying.
Well, he's saying we're at war with them.
Well,
which we are.
Which we are not. We are not at
Well,
war with
there's troops
Islam.
over there.
We are not at war.
There's
with,
troops there.
Well,
I don't know. There's
so
troops.
yeah, well,
we're
there's-
bombing them. We're
well,
bombing
there-
Libya.
there-
you
well,
know.
there's Christians over there too. Are we at war with the Christians there too?
Not many Christians. Not many Christians in the countries we're at war with.
Well, in Syria, there's a number of Christians.
Syria, there's
Lebanon,
some.
there's a number of Christians.
Some Orthodox.
I mean,
yeah.
well, Maronites. There's a lot of Christians in the Mideast. Christians are not. The Mideast has a lot of Christians in it, Mark. And I think if you go look at the populations of those countries, you'd be shocked.
Well,
Now they're different sects.
I mean,
they're not Lutherans, okay?
Well, I would disagree. And most of the
They're
most
Yazis.
of-
There's
most
lots
of
of different Christian sects,
most in
mean,
Syria, there were a lot of Orthodox, and in the Middle East,
right?
You know,
There's also a lot of Maronites, which are
but I believe the statistics of the countries that we're involved with are predominantly
right.
Muslim people,
And those people look at the terrorists like we look at the KKK. They
Do
don't.
they?
Yes, I mean,
okay,
why are they fleeing?
Let me ask you this.
Otherwise,
So
they'd be
say
sticking
ethnic-
around.
So say ethnically you're Irish.
Nobody gives
say-
up everything, their
say-
job, their home, their family, and
So
moves
say
away.
ethnically. So say ethnically you're German, or say ethnically you're Irish.
Right.
And the United States goes over to Germany or Ireland without good cause and starts bombing them. Would the average German, even if he's in the United States, maybe great grandfathers? I have a couple German friends. Maybe their great grandparents came over, right? Would they like it? Would you? Would the German American who came in the United States, and the United States is over there bombing their people, destroying the water supplies, destroying the water supplies, the infrastructure?
Right.
I don't think they like it.
Right.
So I don't know if that created terrorism. If I were a German American, and that I'd say, well, it's to be expected. I think that's what I would say. Well, I think the terrorism to be expected. They have no other way of engaging in war.
Well, exactly.
So they're doing. Ireland would be better example because Germany would have more.
That doesn't mean you agree that that's the way to go, but you can understand it.
I would understand it.
There's a
right?
difference between understanding
Well, I
and
don't-
agreeing
you know,
with it.
Well, I don't know. So I think these issues, and you'd have to agree with what I said, has some degree of validity.
That
This
we're
is
at
never
war with
discussed.
Islam?
Well, yes.
No.
Well, I don't. Why? What? Well, okay. I don't know.
I mean, let's go down to the mosque and talk to the guys down there and ask you if they think.
Well, I had on the acting imam on the show, and by the way, I had a hard time getting that show aired. You know.
I did not.
Yeah. I had a hard time getting that show aired. As a matter of fact, last time I tried to put it on, I didn't put that it was acting imam
Who tried
on the
to
disc.
oppose it?
Well, you tell me. You know how this stuff works. You drop it off here, and then you put it at the station. I don't know. I'm not there.
Oh, I see.
You know. So I had a difficult time. Look, I have no personal problems with people's religious beliefs. And as a matter of fact, I'm one of those people that probably studied all these different religions.
Right.
And I'll tell you something else. There's almost no religion that I've studied, even the ones that we think are marginal, Scientology, whatever. There's almost no religion that I've studied that I haven't found some value in.
Well, I think that there's some common themes through major religions that are consistent from religion to religion. And usually that's what the founders said. And then everything that came after the founders where all the distortion comes, I mean, if you look at Buddhism, which everybody thinks is kind of pure, it's not pure at all compared to what Buddha taught. I mean, it has sects and different parts and divisions, and there's different schools of Buddhist thought. And there's probably as many different forms of Buddhism as there is of Christianity, and Islam is the same way. It has lots of different.
There's very, very.
Exactly.
They're much probably more varied than Christianity.
Absolutely. So I'm saying, to even think that there's some kind of, Christian.
Well, I don't know.
that
Bush
means
said it.
one thing.
Well,
It's
no,
just
wait a
ridiculous.
minute. Wait. Here's where you are incorrect. Bush Jr. basically said that we're going to do a crusade.
Yes.
And there was implications of that.
Yes.
So if that's not against the Muslims, I don't know what is.
Well,
He said it.
We can be at war. We may be at war with the Muslims, but the Muslims are not at war with us.
Well,
Okay, Islam is not at war with the United States. Okay? First of all, how can a religion be at war with a country? Yeah, there's no, there's just not. A religion may be able to be at war with another religion, I guess, but first of all, we're not a Christian nation.
well, that's a complicated discussion. What was the percentage of Americans who were Christians?
Well, what percentage
when
was
the
it?
country was formed? Then I heard a man on Bob Jones' show the other morning that was saying it's a Protestant. The other morning saying it's a Protestant nation, and it was a Protestant nation. It's supposed to be a Protestant nation in the early state, whatever, in the early state government documents. So this.
Well, some were formed with the Catholic Church, though, Maryland, and they were. Based,
Obviously. Well, let's switch subjects real quick because
Sure.
one of the notes that you wanted to talk about, and I'm curious about it because I know Ron Olson is our city manager, and you wanted to talk about Ron Olson's management. So, what do you want to talk about his?
Well, I
management
just
for?
think I think he's done a good job. I think there's a lot of people have a lot of mixed opinions.
Okay. I thought he looked for another job. He was going to split the scene. Now he's back.
No. I think what happened there. I think there was a number of things going on. First of all, I don't think he went looking for that job. I think they approached him, and he's from Idaho, I believe, or someplace out there. He's from that area, and so put him a lot closer to family. And I think he entertained the idea for a little bit. And I think.
What about the city streets? I mean, they're full of. I was in Austin a couple weeks ago. I didn't see one pothole in any of the city streets. And why do I hear all these ridiculous conversations about how are we going to fix the city streets as if they've never seen a street? Streets haven't been around since Roman times,
Well, the
and they have no idea in the world on even where to find where the potholes are. It's the most ridiculous discussion that I could imagine.
That's really not the discussion. The
Okay.
discussion, and there was a report by Andy Taubman, who's the head of the street committee at last week's meeting. Fortunately, it was at 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night after they've been going all day on the Uber thing, and so nobody was around to watch it. And
Right. Maybe was that done on purpose?
well,
Again,
Nelda
I'm
always
looking.
Nelda always puts that stuff at the end of the
Yeah,
agenda.
there you go.
That's what I'm saying. Nelda tries to control
People are
that
sly.
stuff. She tries to work that stuff. Anyway, so basically, if we were to try to accomplish a full-scale program and say we were going to fix every residential street in town that needed rebuilding and redoing, it would cost us $43 million a year for 60 years, every year for 60 years. Well, we don't have the money for that, obviously. Okay? So how do we change? How do we make that formula work so that people are getting a return on their investment? And it's because of years and years of neglect. It's not this council that created this situation. They're trying to fix it. Well, a lot of the answers come from how we rebuild streets. We only have basically one supplier for asphalt. And when asked what kind of profits by the street committee he made, he reportedly said, obscene profits, and laughed like it was a joke. And actually, we're paying 4 or 5 times what other cities are
So you
paying.
don't think that's a failure in the city?
It is.
City management?
And well, not of the city manager. For one thing, the city manager is looking at, I'm trying to remember how many 100 employees they have over there, spread over a whole bunch of different departments. And he has went through over half of the departments and audited over half the departments. They're currently going through engineering. A lot of the problems came out of engineering. Last week they had to pass an $18 million issuance of certificate of obligation notes to cover the shortfall in the 2012 bond. It seems that the engineering department was in charge of the bidding, and they were $18 million off. The staples from Bronner to Castoris was off by $7 million. It's a half a mile. They were off by over half. How do you do that? What kind of engineering department do you have? Well, Dan Biles is no longer there and hasn't been there for a while. And they started to look at the whole department as these issues started to surface. So it's kind of like, I think the city, when you look at the city and how it's divided up, we have something like 40 departments, which is way too many, I think. It's hard to even get your arms around, let alone figure out what's going on. But he's been making major progress. And one of the things that the street committee, I think, is the ad hoc committee structure is an excellent way to address these problems, these ones that are real and transient problems. For example, staff is short, and with the growth, they cut over 200 people from City Hall a couple years ago. They have not restored them all. We've had increased growth, and have been trying to keep up. And so I think that a lot of they have kept up because they have become more efficient and better at it. But I think that when we look at what we look at is when we find out, well, the engineering department was basically just handing these stuff off. They had this relationship with this one contractor that worked smoothly and didn't cause them any problems, so they just kept feeding the work to it. And so the city ad hoc committee was able to go in there and say, all right, this is what's going on, and figure out what was going on, and now they've come up with a solution to recommend to City Council, which is break up the jobs into smaller ones so that the smaller contracts can be they can be competitive. The bigger contractors take all the jobs right now because they're sized so that they're the only ones who can bond the job, can post the bond to do the job.
Well, I'm glad that you have a detailed analysis of the issues, et cetera, from an insider perspective. But I could tell you more as a general citizen that hasn't followed the issues and got in there and examined it, that I've been paying high taxes for many years now, high sales taxes, et cetera, in Corpus Christi, and property taxes, et cetera. And I'm driving on very, very poor roads. And I could say that they passed what I thought was a ridiculous maintenance program when they say
that was a previous council.
We're going to maintain. How do you maintain something that isn't in a state of repair? You got to repair it first, and then you maintain.
Well,
it.
that's about that's about the 40% of the roads, 35% of the roads that
don't need repair.
That don't need rebuilding.
Don't need.
There's a difference between maintaining. What we don't want, Mark. We only have 35% of the roads that don't need totally rebuilt. Well, let's not let that 35% fall into the total rebuilding category because that's much more expensive. So the street maintenance fee, which I disagreed with how it was done, I thought it should have been a property tax issue, put on property tax clean. That way it's a business deduction, seniors get a break, it's fair. It's much more fair than what we're doing. It would have been fine. I disagree with that. And remember, it was the last council that passed that. Wasn't this council?
Well, it's always the last. That's a little bit like always placing the blame on the last president, etc. No. I mean, somebody's got to take and that's one of the problems with our form of government, perhaps. Right. Who's the responsible person? Year after year after year of bad streets and continually bad and worse streets, etc. Somebody's got to take responsibilities. Let's say. Your detailed analysis is interesting, but nonetheless, the problem is apparently only getting worse every year.
Absolutely, it gets worse every year. But I think that they're working towards a solution. The worst thing you can do, Mark, is to come up with a half-baked idea and just do something and say, okay, we're getting it done. But then 5 years later, you're right back in the same spot because it wasn't done correctly. Right.
Well, that's true too. But somebody's got to start. I know, but you do have to start. We can do it
the old way, which is Nelda got her street done.
I've heard complaints about that, and here's what gets me. And here's what gets me about that. Let's say that my street is done here at the office or something. Well, a lot of good that does me if I got to drive on these bumpy roads to get here.
Right.
But
it increases the value of your house by 16 to 17%.
I think you said that on one of the previous. I think you said that one of the previous shows. But that's another good argument for Uber because to maintain your car in a city full of potholes, that's where everybody drives a truck here, right?
Right.
I got my last car. I said, well, I can't get a regular car because of the ground.
I know. I got a 4-wheel drive.
You got to get something off the ground to make sure they're buying out your vehicle, right?
Exactly.
So you like the job that
I do.
Ron Olson is doing.
The thing, his biggest weakness, which I think he's starting to, I think he's figured out, and he's getting more people involved. His biggest weakness has been in hiring his assistant city managers. He's got a couple really good ones, but he had a couple real weak ones that he had to push on down the road, and he did, and they're being replaced. And I think that hopefully that we have a stronger management team. But his own decision-making process and what he's brought to City Hall in terms of integrity, that was missing under our previous city managers for years and years. We had city managers that catered to specific political interests, not manage the city as a whole. And he's done a good job of that, and I think he'll be stronger because of this new majority. The majority, we know, shifted, and it got stronger because of Lillian Riojas leaving, who was one of the old crew.
Worked for the refineries.
Right. And so I think that Michael Hunter adds a new progressive thinking to that council, and now that council is going to be, I think, more and more 6-3 on issues. Mark is on his last leg. He cannot run again unless he chooses to run against the mayor for mayor, which he may do after the Uber thing. He was really upset. I've never seen Mark so upset.
Well, at least he talked the talk and walked the walk.
He did.
He avers he's a Republican.
I
He
know.
avers he's for
I
free
know.
enterprise. He's avers he's against
Right.
regulation.
Right.
So he took the right stand on Uber
I know.
on that.
I went up and said,
You know?
I went up and when I went up and spoke, I said, I want the city secretary to note that Mark, Scott, and I are in total agreement today, which has probably never happened in 12 years.
Well, with me either. You mentioned the new police chief. I was very pleased with the choice of the new police chief
yes.
personally because he was from here. He did know the community,
Right.
number one. And then number two, I think he did the intelligent thing. We're in for the traffic accidents. They do
Yes.
come out and do police reports.
Yes.
I was personally affected by that
Yeah.
in a serious accident that I had, when the officer was going to just take off without doing a police report, and I had to say, "Well, she doesn't have insurance."
Right.
Then they did it. So I thought that was a positive thing. I don't know what else has the new police chief instituted. Anything else new that you're aware of?
No, I think one of the things he's working real hard on to work with the homeless community. I think he's got a lot of get up and go. I think he may still have to get a little wiser on not allowing himself to be manipulated by our mayor, who seems to like to use him as her excuse, But other than that, I think he's doing a great job, and I think he's got good. I think the department morale is good. I think they're feeling like they're on the right direction. They're going in the right direction. I think that I'm hoping that we'll see more improvement as we see some of these changes take place over at the prosecutor's office and things like that. That will hopefully
The
temper
DA,
some
yeah.
of the.
That was a big upset. Mark Skirka.
Absolutely huge, and
Mark
way
Garcia.
overdue. Way overdue, I think. I think the public just finally got tired of Mark Skirka.
Well, the insiders in the courthouse all had the similar complaints, and even though I've practiced criminal law all these years, I guess I wasn't seeing it or whatever in my particular cases,
Right.
the way they were being handled. I didn't see it. They all had the similar complaints. I will tell you something. No one, it would be hard to be more qualified than Mark Skirka for that job.
Yes.
Mark Skirka was prosecuting major felonies,
Right.
and I tried them against him 25 years ago,
Right.
capital murder
Right.
and
Right.
murder, solely, and knew complex rules of evidence,
Yes.
etc. So I hated, I don't know. I'm sure the loss was tough for him. Maybe his management, maybe the problems with management were true. He tried to micromanage too much. I could say I had some indication on that by speaking to some of the prosecutors. But we're reaching the end of the show. I always wanted to thank you for coming on,
Thank
John.
you.
I do appreciate the information. Very knowledgeable on the local, state, and national level. Even though we not always in 100% agreement.
That's fine.
Thank you very much,
Thanks,
John.
Mark.
Take care.